Let me tell you about two men. One of them never finished high school. He worked as a janitor for most of his life. He pumped gas, he fixed cars in his garage on the weekends, and when he died at 87 years old, he left behind $8 million. The other man had 2 degrees. He climbed the corporate ladder. He became an executive. He was smart, successful, respected. And a few years before the janitor died quietly a millionaire. This executive filed for bankruptcy. Same country, same decades, same economy. So what happened? Here's the uncomfortable truth. This book is going to force you to sit with getting good with money has almost nothing to do with how smart you are. It has everything to do with how you think. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why the janitor won, why the executive lost, and which one you're currently becoming right now without even realizing it. Stick with me. This one's going to change how you see every dollar you'll ever earn. The man who wrote this book, Morgan Housel, wasn't always a best-selling author. He spent years as a financial columnist, watching markets, watching people, and noticing something strange. The smartest people he met, the ones with finance degrees, the ones who could recite economic theory word for word, they weren't always the ones building real wealth. Meanwhile, ordinary people, teachers, nurses, mechanics, were quietly retiring with fortunes nobody expected. That contradiction bothered him for years. And it eventually became this book. When it came out, something interesting happened. It didn't stay in the finance section for long. Therapists were recommending it. Parents were gifting it to their kids graduating college. People who had never read a finance book in their life were finishing this one in a weekend. Why? Because this isn't really a book about stocks or spreadsheets. It's a book about human nature, about fear, ego, greed, and the stories we tell ourselves to justify our worst money decisions. And once you understand the psychology behind money, the actual math becomes the easy part. So let's step into this story properly. Because what you're about to hear isn't a checklist. It's a series of human stories, real ones that are going to rewire the way you look at every paycheck, every purchase, every investment you'll ever make. Picture this, it's 2008. The world is falling apart. Banks are collapsing. People are losing homes overnight. And somewhere in America, there's a young man watching his family's entire savings disappear in a matter of weeks. Now fast forward 20 years. That same man is now in his late 30s. He has a good job. He has money saved. And yet, he refuses to put a single dollar into the stock market. His friends call him paranoid. His co-workers tell him he's missing out, but he doesn't care. Is he wrong? Here's where this book gently stops you and says, wait, before you judge him, ask yourself something. What year were you born? What did your family experience with money? Because here's the truth most people never stop to consider. Every single person's relationship with money was built in a completely different world. Someone who grew up during massive inflation thinks about saving completely differently than someone who grew up during a booming economy. Someone whose parents lost everything in a recession will flinch at risk for the rest of their life, even if mathematically, that risk made sense. We like to believe money decisions are made with logic, spreadsheets, interest rates, probability, but that's not what's actually happening in someone's head when they decide to save every penny or spend recklessly or avoid the stock market entirely. They're not making a financial decision. They're replaying their own life story. Think about your own family for a second. Maybe one of your parents was incredibly frugal, turning off lights in empty rooms, reusing containers, refusing to waste a single dollar. And maybe you rolled your eyes at that growing up. But what if you knew why? What if you knew they grew up with nothing? Suddenly, it doesn't look irrational anymore. It looks like survival. That's the first big idea this book wants you to absorb before anything else. Nobody is bad with money because they're stupid. They're behaving in a way that made perfect sense inside the story their life gave them. And here's why this matters for you specifically. The way you handle money right now, the fear, the confidence, the spending habits, none of it is random. It was shaped by things you didn't choose. Which means the first step to actually mastering money isn't learning a new formula. It's understanding your own story well enough to know when it's helping you and when it's quietly sabotaging you. Now let's talk about two college roommates, same school, same grades. Both study business, both graduate the same year into the same job market. One of them joins a small startup nobody's heard of. The other joins a stable, respected company. 10 years later, the startup guy is a multi-millionaire. The company exploded. The other guy is doing fine, comfortable, but nowhere close to that kind of wealth. Now here's the question this book wants you to really sit with. Was the millionaire smarter? Or was he lucky? This is one of the most quietly powerful ideas in the entire book, and it's one almost nobody wants to admit out loud. Success in money is never purely skill, and failure is never purely stupidity. Luck and risk are silent partners in every financial outcome you'll ever see. They just never show up in the interviews. Think about the famous founders you've heard of. The ones everyone studies in business schools, the ones whose biographies sell millions of copies. For every one of them, there were other people, just as talented, just as hardworking, sometimes even more disciplined, who made almost the exact same bets and lost everything. You've just never heard their names because failure doesn't get invited to give commencement speeches. This is dangerous for two reasons. First, when we only study winners, we start copying their exact choices, assuming those choices caused the win. But sometimes the choice wasn't even that different from the one that caused someone else to fail. The difference was timing, circumstance, luck. Second, and this one is even sneakier when something goes wrong for us, we often blame bad luck. But when something goes wrong for someone else, we blame their decisions. Try this the next time you see someone go bankrupt after a business failed. Your instinct might whisper, well, they took a stupid risk. But when it's you, suddenly it's the market turned against me. Or nobody could have predicted that. This book doesn't ask you to become cynical about success or to stop trying. It asks you to hold your successes and your failures a little more gently. To stop assuming every rich person is a genius and every struggling person made bad choices. Because if you truly accept that luck plays a role, something powerful happens. You stop taking insane, reckless risks trying to copy someone else's outlier story, and you start building a strategy that can survive even when luck doesn't go your way. That one shift right there is what separates people who get rich once from people who stay wealthy for life. Now here's a story that genuinely stops people in their tracks. There was once a very successful hedge fund manager, brilliant, wealthy beyond most people's imagination. Someone who had already made more money than he could spend in several lifetimes. And yet, he kept taking bigger and bigger risks, chasing more. Eventually, one high-stakes bet collapsed. And in a matter of days, he lost almost everything he had built over decades. Now here's the part that should genuinely unsettle you. He didn't need that money. He wasn't trying to pay rent or feed his kids. He already had more wealth than he could ever use. So why keep risking it? This is where the book introduces one of its most emotionally honest ideas, the idea of enough, not as in settling or lacking ambition, but as a boundary, a line you draw and refuse to cross, no matter how tempting the next opportunity looks. Here's why this trips up so many people. Even brilliant ones, our brains are wired to compare, not to some fixed objective standard of a good life, but to the people directly around us. The neighbor with the nicer car, the old classmate who just bought a bigger house, the influencer flexing a lifestyle online. The moment you hit a goal you once dreamed about, your reference point quietly shifts to someone one step ahead of you, and the chase never actually ends because you keep moving it. Picture someone who finally buys the car they always wanted. For about 2 weeks, it feels incredible. And then one day they're at a stoplight and a slightly nicer version of that same car pulls up next to them, and just like that, the joy fades a little. This isn't a character flaw, it's just how the human brain is built. But if you don't recognize it, it becomes dangerous because it pushes people to take financial risks they don't actually need to take just to keep up with a moving target that was never real to begin with. The people in this book who built lasting wealth weren't the ones who earned the most. They were the ones who at some point sat down and honestly asked themselves, how much is actually enough for me? And then had the discipline to stop once they got there. That single question, quiet, unglamorous, almost boring, might be the most financially powerful sentence you'll hear in this entire video. Let's go back to that janitor from the very beginning of this video. Remember him? His name in real life was Ronald Reed. And here's what's fascinating. He wasn't secretly a genius investor. He didn't pick some miracle stock. He didn't time the market perfectly. He simply put small amounts of money into solid, boring investments and left them alone. For over 65 years, here's the thing about compounding that almost nobody truly feels in their gut. Even if they've heard the definition 100 times, it doesn't look impressive at first. For years, sometimes decades, the growth looks small, boring, almost embarrassing compared to people making flashy, fast trades. But compounding isn't about explosive growth in the beginning. It's about time. It rewards patience more than intelligence. It rewards the person willing to look unexciting for 20, 30, 40 years. Imagine two investors. One starts investing at 25, puts in a modest amount every month, and never touches it. The other starts at 35, but invests almost double the amount, trying to catch up. Who ends up with more money by retirement? Almost every time, the first one, not because they were smarter, not because they picked better investments, simply because they gave their money more time to quietly multiply itself. This is the part of the book that reframes wealth building as less of a math problem and more of a psychological one. Because their real challenge was never understanding compounding. The real challenge is having the patience to sit still while it works, especially during the years when nothing seems to be happening. Ronald Read didn't get rich because he found a secret formula. He got rich because he simply refused to interrupt the process. While others were chasing hot stock tips, changing strategies every few months, panicking during downturns, he just continued. Quietly, boringly, consistently. And somewhere in that boring consistency, $8 million was built. Now here's the moment in this book that genuinely makes people put it down and just stare at the wall for a second. Picture a man driving a brand new luxury car through a busy street. Heads turn, people glance. Someone thinks, wow, that guy must be rich. But here's the twist this book forces you to confront. When you see someone driving an expensive car, you are never actually admiring them. You're imagining yourself in that car, being admired by others. The driver, ironically, is invisible in that fantasy. Nobody is thinking about how rich the driver is. They're just imagining themselves behind that wheel. This is called in the book, the man in the car paradox, and once you hear it, you can't unhear it. Here's the deeper truth hiding underneath that story. Wealth, real wealth, isn't the things you can see. It's not the car in the driveway, or the designer bag, or the vacation photos. Those are all things that were bought, which means by definition that money is already gone. Real wealth is invisible. It's the money sitting quietly in a retirement account nobody sees. It's the emergency fund that never gets flaunted on social media. It's the financial cushion that lets someone sleep peacefully at night, unnoticed by anyone around them. We've built an entire culture around signaling wealth, spending money to look rich to people who frankly aren't even paying that much attention to us. Meanwhile, actual wealth is being built quietly, invisibly, by people who never feel the need to prove anything to anyone. This is the gut punch of the entire book. So many people confuse being rich with looking rich and spend their entire lives chasing the second one, mistaking it for the first, the janitor who left $8 million behind. Nobody on the street ever looked at him twice. He never looked rich a single day in his life. But he was. Here's something most people have never considered. You don't need a specific reason to save money. We're taught to save for something, a house, a wedding, a vacation, retirement, and that's fine. But this book introduces a slightly different, almost rebellious idea. Save money simply because the future is unpredictable and you have no idea what's coming. Not because you're pessimistic, but because you're humble about how little any of us can actually predict. Think about it honestly. Nobody in 2019 had global pandemic written into their 5-year financial plan. Nobody expects the layoff, the medical emergency, the sudden opportunity that requires cash on hand right now. The people who survived those shocks with the least damage weren't the ones who predicted them. They were the ones who had built-in room for error, a cushion, flexibility. This is where the book gently criticizes something we all secretly admire. The person who calculates everything down to the decimal point, who invests every spare dollar because cash sitting still is wasted potential. It sounds smart on paper, but it's fragile because life doesn't follow spreadsheets. The people who build lasting financial peace aren't the ones squeezing every last percentage point of return out of their money. They're the ones who leave a little slack in the rope, enough that when life pulls unexpectedly hard, they don't snap. Save money you don't have a name for. Some of the most valuable dollars you'll ever save are the ones with no specific job, just sitting there, quietly protecting you from a future you can't see coming. Now here's a question this book asks that most finance books never even bother to ask. What is money actually for? Not how do you grow it, not how do you invest it, but what's the point of having it at all? And the answer this book lands on is almost startlingly simple. The highest value money can ever give you isn't a mansion or a private jet or a closet full of designer clothes. It's control over your own time. Imagine two people earning the exact same salary. One of them hates their job but feels trapped. Bills, debt, no savings, forced to show up every single day regardless of how miserable it makes them. The other has built enough of a financial cushion that if their job became unbearable tomorrow, they could walk away, take a breath, and figure out their next move without panic. Same income, completely different lives. That second person isn't necessarily richer in dollar terms, but they are infinitely richer in something this book argues matters more: autonomy. The ability to wake up and decide how to spend their day, instead of having that decision made for them by financial desperation. This is why the book gently pushes back against the idea that money's purpose is buying things. Things fade. Excitement around a new purchase rarely lasts more than a few weeks. But the quiet background feeling of not being trapped, that doesn't fade. That compounds too, just like your investments do. Alright, let's bring all of this down to earth, because none of this matters if we can't actually apply it to real life. So here's what you can start doing, starting today. 1. Understand your own money story before judging anyone else's, including your own past decisions. Ask yourself honestly, where did my beliefs about money come from? What fears or lessons am I still carrying from childhood or hard times, and are they still serving me? 2. Stop assuming financial outcomes are purely about skill. When you see a huge success story, look for the role luck may have played and build your own plan in a way that doesn't depend on getting extremely lucky to survive. 3. Define your own enough. Sit down, actually write it out. What does a genuinely good life look like for you? Specifically, not compared to your neighbor, not compared to social media. Write a number, a lifestyle, a feeling. And when you hit it, practice the discipline of not chasing further just because you technically could. 4. Start investing early, even with small amounts. And then this is the hard part, leave it alone. Boring consistency beats flashy timing almost every single time. Automate it if you can, so willpower isn't even required. 5. Stop trying to look wealthy. Redirect that energy into quietly building actual wealth. Nobody is watching as closely as you think, and the people who matter won't love you more for a bigger car. 6. Build a cash cushion with no specific purpose. Let it exist purely as protection against the unexpected. Room for error isn't wasted money. It's insurance against a future you can't predict. 7. Regularly ask yourself, is this financial decision buying me more freedom or more obligation? Let that single question quietly guide bigger purchases, career choices, and lifestyle decisions. None of these 7 steps require a finance degree. None of them require perfect market timing. They require patience, self-awareness, and the discipline to play a long, quiet game while everyone else is chasing something louder. Now let's talk honestly about this book, because no book is perfect and you deserve a real opinion, not just praise. What this book does incredibly well is translate complicated financial psychology into stories almost anyone can understand and feel, regardless of their background. You don't need to know anything about investing to get real value from it. It's less a finance manual, more a book about human behavior that happens to use money as its lens. But here's a fair criticism: if you're looking for step-by-step, detailed investment strategies, specific stock advice, or technical breakdowns of financial instruments, this isn't that book. It intentionally stays at the level of mindset and behavior, not tactics. Some readers who already deeply understand behavioral finance might find a few of these ideas familiar, since they draw from decades of established psychological research. But even then, the way the stories are woven together makes the material land differently than a textbook ever could. Who is this best for? Honestly, almost everyone. Young adults just starting their financial journey will get a foundational mindset most people take decades to learn the hard way. People already deep into their careers, feeling like they're on a treadmill chasing more, will find this book almost uncomfortably relatable. And if you've ever felt behind, anxious, or confused about money, this book won't hand you a spreadsheet. It'll hand you a mirror. Let's go back to where we started, the janitor and the executive. By now, you understand exactly why the story unfolded the way it did. It was never about intelligence or income or even opportunity. It was about mindset, about patience, about defining enough and having the discipline to stop chasing once you got there, about building quiet, invisible wealth instead of loud, visible spending, about leaving room for a future neither of them could predict. The janitor didn't win because life was easier for him. It almost certainly wasn't. He won because somewhere along the way, without ever reading a finance book, he had internalized exactly what this entire book is trying to teach you in a few hours. And here's the beautiful, slightly terrifying truth hiding in all of this. You don't need to be exceptional to build real wealth. You don't need a genius IQ, a lucky break, or a 6-figure salary. You need patience most people don't have, humility most people won't admit to, and a willingness to play a long, quiet, unglamorous game while the world around you chases something faster and louder. So here's my question for you, sitting there right now, watching this. What story is your money currently telling? Is it built on fear from your past? Is it chasing someone else's finish line? Or is it quietly, patiently building something that will still be standing decades from now? Long after the flashy stuff has faded, you don't need to have all the answers today. But maybe, just maybe today is the day you start asking the question. If this story genuinely gave you something to think about, that's exactly why this channel exists. To turn books into experiences, not just summaries. If you want more of these, hit subscribe. It genuinely helps this channel keep going. And if there's a book that changed the way you think about money, life, or yourself, drop it in the comments below. I read every single one, and honestly, some of my favorite videos have come straight from your suggestions. Until next time, spend wisely, save quietly, and let your money tell a story you'd actually be proud of.